good to be together. Well, listen, we have a great opportunity to hear from Bill and Michele Allan, and so we're going to commence this interview right now with John Garner being our MC. So, John, thanks for doing that. Appreciate it.
Well, listen, come on up, Bill and Michele, and we've got a historic day unfolding with big transitions with Bill, the older one, and Bill, the younger one, coming up. I could not resist. And so often, when a new position is being stepped into, some of you know Bill and Michele, and many of us don't. And so we wanted to get to know a little bit about the people behind the position. And Bill and I chatted a little bit yesterday, and then I was introduced to Karen. So I've tried to do a little bit of homework here. There you go. Yes. Sorry, Michele. So tell us a little bit about family.
All right, I'll let you answer that one.
Sure. Michele.
We have 3 daughters, and they're all married. And our oldest lives in Des Moines, Iowa. And our second daughter and her husband live in Coaldale, Alberta. And then our third daughter, she lives the closest. She's just 3 hours west here from Wallaceburg, Ontario. Don't know how many know where Wallaceburg is. Oh, that's great. And then we also have 3 granddaughters, sweet little grandbabies. And we're expecting a 4th grandchild at the end of October.
Excellent. Hey, so tell us a little bit about the ministry paths that you have traveled that have led you to this place and this platform and the transition upcoming.
That's a good question. For the last 28 years, Michele and I have been missionaries with World Team. We served 15 years in Peru, began our ministry in a little village out in the Amazon, and thought we would spend 30 years there, retire, come home, and write my book. The Lord had other plans, and later on moved us to the capital of Lima, and then moved us into a leadership role in our mission here in Canada. And about 2 to 3 years ago, I was really starting to pray, God, where are you leading me? Not that was unhappy or really wanted to change, but I recognized that God is always moving and preparing you for what's next. And as I prayed and talked to guys in my small group that I meet with on Saturdays, serving with the AGC on the national board and as the national chair for the Church Reproduction Commission, I began to just sense God calling me to move more in this direction. I remember going and having lunch with Bill and saying, Bill, I feel God maybe calling me to put my name into the hat. What do you think? And just talking to other people and praying, just felt God leading us in this direction, and more had that confirmation.
When you told me a little bit about your journey in the Amazon and 3 hours trip from where you would land, I thought, what an incredibly eclectic journey that God has led you on. Now, just coming out of that, what are some of the defining moments that have shaped you both? It could be an encounter, a person, a circumstance where you would go, this so shaped and has been used of God to make us to who we are.
Yeah. Well, why don't you start?
Sure. Why does everybody
He's
laugh?
still thinking about his answer.
That's right. I grew up in a Christian home, and we attended church and as well involved ourselves in church. And I would say that family devotions was another high value in our home growing up. I was privileged to go to a Christian school, and my 4th grade teacher led me to Christ. And I would say another significant event in my life occurred when I was 16. I had the opportunity to go to a short-term mission trip to Peru, happened to be Peru, and the Lord really worked on my heart, and I committed my life at that time to serve Him full-time in mission work. So after high school, I went to Bible college, and that is where I met my significant other. From there, we obviously were married, and this month, actually, we'll be celebrating our 31st wedding anniversary. Just reminding you of that, honey. And then the Lord blessed us with our family, and we have done ministry for a number of years. That has been greatly influential overseas in Peru.
Bill, what about you? Some defining moments that have shaped you?
I think there are several that I go back and see the Lord's hand in my life. I didn't come from a Christian family. And I came from in all honesty, a very dysfunctional, troubled family, and was heading in that same direction. And it was a high school teacher, when I was just about 17, shared the gospel with me, and I came to know Christ through his ministry. And he became one of the 4 men that I use constantly as men that God placed in my life that had significant impact into who I am today. In fact, he wasn't just a high school teacher. He became a mentor. He led me to the Lord. He discipled me. And later on, he supported us as missionaries. And he would call me when I was in Canada, or he would write me and say, I'm praying for you every day. And for me, it was such a privilege on a home assignment one year to take my 3 girls and have dinner with Ken and his wife and say, girls, this is the man that led your daddy to Jesus. And it really had full circle. Just a couple of years ago, his wife had called me and said, Ken has dementia, and he's really losing it, and I've had to put him in a home. We can't have him at our home anymore. And my daughter at the time, my middle daughter, was in university in a nursing program. And in the summer, she was working at a local seniors home. And she would come home and say, Dad, because she works with the dementia patients, the palliative care patients. She said, I've got this wonderful old guy. He's a really big man. And Ken was large man. He had been a prison guard years earlier. And she said, but he's such a wonderful man. He carries his Bible, and he talks about Jesus, and his name is Ken. And I said, is his name Ken Holman? And here my daughter had the privilege of caring for him in his last days. So he was a significant influence in my life. I think another significant influence was at 22, I had a short-term trip to Peru, like Michele, and God used that to really cement his call to ministry in my life. And that was just, at 22 as a young Christian, it was really the defining moment where he gave me a vision of the future and where I should be moving towards. And then I think lastly as well, God bringing Michele into my life, she's that complementary, just fit perfect. And I've so appreciated what she has been in my life over many years. Funny, Bill just recently made a comment that behind every successful man is a very surprised mother-in-law. And I think that might be true in our case as well. But it has certainly been a team effort, and I've so much appreciated her input, and not just the positives, at times calling me out and telling me you need to do this. You need to just do this. Smart enough. Yeah, and she's Dutch, so she's pretty open.
Kind of sounds like it. Hey, and what is the anniversary date this month?
June 20th.
That was so quick. You were
you
totally
betcha.
there. Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Now, one of the questions I love to ask ministry people, and I had sent this to you in advance, is what makes you tick and what really ticks you off?
Oh.
One of my first 2 messages when I came to Redeemer 9.5 years ago was the first week, what made Jesus tick? And then the second week, what ticked Jesus off? And I met a pastor about a month ago who said, I was here and I remember those first 2 messages. So, yeah, what is it that drives you, that makes you tick? And what really, in a mature way, ticks you off?
Well, it's interesting. When I first saw the question, I made a list, just sort of thinking out loud. And I realized that my what ticks me off list was pretty long, and anyway, I had to work on the list. What really just enthralls me as a ministry leader is to see people come to maturity in Christ and be what God has called them to be out of their gifting. Too often we want to be something that we're not because it's up front or it has maybe it's a bit of a privilege. But when I see people working out of their gifting and enjoying that and just enjoying what Jesus is doing in their life, that just thrills me. And I think on top of that, seeing people develop as leaders and then begin to develop other leaders, that's what just really, it just satisfies my heart, I think, as a ministry leader to say, I can step back because these guys are moving forward, or this group is developing other leaders. And that just, I think as a ministry person or somebody that's following Jesus, it just enthralls me to see disciples become disciple makers. I think also what drives me is really a sense of humor. I think in ministry, you have to have a sense of humor. You need to be able to laugh with others, laugh at yourself, and just enjoy life. Because that's what it's all about with Jesus. It's a community. It's a family. Let's get to the other side. What ticks me off?
About ministry
About ministry,
stuff.
yes.
About ministry stuff.
I think what really in some ways bothers me is apathy in the Christian life. I look at my own background and just the struggle of, I could go out partying all weekend long and that wasn't a problem for my family, but going to church on a Sunday morning was just out of this world. That's just over the top. And when I see people in North America who have all the resources in Christian radio and Christian bookstores and everything we have here and just sort of have a apathetic attitude toward the Christian life, it kind of ticks me off. We worked for many years in an environment where pastors, if they had a study Bible, that was the extent of their theological library. I've probably got 50 Bibles in multiple languages and versions and helps and everything else. And so when I see people that just sort of say, well, the Christian life, it's what I do on Sunday, that kind of ticks me off. But what really ticks me off in life more than anything is that the Leafs have not won the Cup since I was 4 years old. We're hoping that's going to change next season.
They've been hoping that for decades next season.
I'm a man of hope.
Yes. So one last question, and this has been, when you're thinking about 7 or 8 minutes, getting to sense individuals and a couple's heartbeat, that's very cool. And when we interview elders and deacons when they come on the board, the last question we always ask is, tell us one thing about yourself that we would not know unless you divulged it. So other than that, we know about the Leafs. There we go. It's amazing how there are transitions very quickly to his dear wife, Michele. Okay.
As you know, of course, our last name is Allan with an A, and I don't think we deliberately did this, but we ended up having 3 girls, and they all have names that start with A. But the more interesting thing about it is all of our blood type is A, with the exception that I am negative, RH negative. There you go.
Good. Okay.
I'll tell you 2 things.
Sure.
The first is that I survived an emergency appendectomy in a remote Amazon village under local anesthetic on a big wooden table performed by a Catholic priest.
Like, really?
I have the scar to show it.
Wow.
It's not pretty. It's a longer story.
We'll take your word for it.
And secondly, Michele and I are both first-generation Canadians. My father emigrated from Scotland, and her father emigrated from the Netherlands.
Wow, very cool. We so appreciate you just sharing with humor and candor and honesty. This has been so rich. So God bless you, and I know that we have moments of transition going on later, but thanks so much, and let's show our appreciation.
Thank you.